Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Town Council meeting, May 15th at 7 p.m. We're a little behind schedule. I apologize. This is being recorded by WCAT for airing and possibly live this evening. I don't know. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Jim Lettieri, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Council Inman. Here. Council Calla. Present. Council Christopher.
Here.
Council Lettieri.
Here.
Council Soto.
Here.
Council McDuffie.
Here.
Council Conti.
Present.
Vice President Boncory.
Here.
President Vecchia.
Present. Entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the May 1st Town Council meeting as circulated with that one revision.
Motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. General information and recommendations. We're going into a public hearing to hear concerns, comments about the fiscal 2019 budget. I will remind everyone that you can speak. Please limit it to 5 minutes because there's a lot of folks here tonight that want to speak. So we appreciate if you keep within the 5-minute limit. Also, just to remind you, whenever addressing the council, if you have an issue, we request that you do not use names if you're referring to a person or an employee, out of respect for everyone. That's part of the council rules. If you do, then I'll rule you out of order. Again, the public hearing starts right now on the fiscal 19 budget. Does anybody wish to be heard? Yes, Guy. Please state your name for the record, please.
My name is Guy Brandenstein. I live on Trident Avenue. Now, I'm assuming, considering that historically, the water sewer increases have been part of the budget, at least as long as Winthrop is at town council and as long as I've lived here, but that is also part of this discussion.
You can address us, if you want to tie it into the budget, you can address it now. That's fine.
The proposed increase is insane, plain and simple. And the reasons given for this increase are contradictory. On the budget, there's a list given, and I've got the list here. But on the email that went out yesterday, a completely different reason is given. And one of the reasons that struck me as funny, and I literally bust out laughing when I read it, that was because of lack of increases in previous years. Now, our previous town manager, basically, if the day had a Y in it, he wanted a water sewer increase. One time, he got a mysterious phone call with a raspy voice in the dark of night telling him to increase the water sewer rate. When we asked for the documentation, it said that the Department of Revenue was concerned about the enterprise funds. Did not mention a fund by name. But he went zingo, straight for the water sewer bill. Also, it was stated in here that a miscalculation on the estimated water sewer usage for fiscal year 2018. Now, neither I nor anybody else that pays a water bill, other than those that did the estimating, is responsible for that. Why should we be held responsible for somebody's lack of math skills? You've got 30 years of usage data at your disposal. Wouldn't that give you a timeline to work with to make an accurate estimate? 30 years of data. The only way you can be that wrong is if you're predicting climate change, because their models are just as bad. So I have one word to say about this increase. No. Period. And I think I speak for a lot of people in town when I say no. Because here's a question for the council. Now, granted, only 3 members are here that were at the time that this happened. Whatever happened to that audit that one of the previous council presidents asked the previous town manager for? That's right. He ignored it. He didn't do it. He was specifically instructed by his boss to perform an audit on the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund. And he never did it. If I had done the same, I'd have been fired on the spot. Anybody else in the private sector would have been fired on the spot. You basically told your boss to take a hike. Yeah. So, without an audit, without knowing where the money is really going, you want us to accept a nearly 20% increase in our water bills? What about the elderly that are on fixed incomes? Or the disabled, who are also on fixed incomes? They're gonna have to move. They can't afford this. I'm gonna have to struggle to afford this. Is that the ultimate goal? Just drive people out of their homes? Because it sure smells that way. I mean, it smells like downwind at Deer Island. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes, sir.
I'm Michael Kantrovitz, I'm Precinct 1, 270 Bowden Street. I want to speak specifically about what's been asked for and what's been proposed in the school budget. It's my understanding that originally what was asked for was $3.2 million. And then after further conversation, that was, I imagine, the request was strong-armed into a $1.2 million request. And of the $1.2 million, only $800 is being offered. I find that immoral and short-sighted. Short-sighted for this reason. We have one of the worst performing school districts in the greater Boston area. Property values are pegged and very well correlated to how well the schools are performing. If you want to realize more property tax revenue, you need a better performing school district than what we currently have. I think it's crazy to me that you would take this out on the children who need these services more than anybody to get a good education and to go wherever they go, and at the same time to say, you can't have all this, but we're going to offer raises across the board to all of our old friends across town government, including, I'm sorry to say, the police department, which has cost us millions of dollars. And how that can be reconciled and can be voted on, it's crazy to me. And I'm a one-issue voter, and it's the schools. And if anybody is going to vote to cut schools or not to fund them in a balanced way, I'm going to do everything that I can to recruit, promote, and campaign for candidates on this town council who will protect our schools.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Borthwick. I'm Precinct 3. I also would like to speak to the budget, specifically the shortfall for the education budget. I think it's really important if Winthrop wants to attract and retain families who are coming to a beautiful town by the sea to live in a lovely home and send their children to a good school, then we're going to have to prioritize education, and this budget does not do that at all. I think that it's important to note that last year there was also a budget deficit that led to the loss of 7 teachers and 7 ESPs, and now on top of that, we have a further deficit. I think that this budget is unacceptable, and I think that this is especially true in light of the salary increases in the proposed budget, namely the person who is requesting a 10.2% raise. After receiving a 15% raise last year, where I come from, that's not typical. All while the courts have determined that there was sexual discrimination against at least one town employee to the tune of a $2 million budget that we now have to pay for. So let me get this straight. We are cutting the funds for schools, for our kids, and we're giving this guy a raise? Is that a joke? I mean, the audacity is off the charts that this is in the proposed budget. If any of you vote for this budget with the deficit for schools, I will put all of my time, energy, other resources that I have in making sure that you do not get reelected. I am more than happy to pay taxes for the services that the town should provide, the vital services, other things like having a ferry, which I think is awesome. But I'm not willing to subsidize sexual discrimination, especially at the top levels of our government, and especially at the expense of my children. It's apparent to me that the town, in some instances, doesn't value the opinion and the strength of women. However, I would caution all of you against underestimating the women that I know, at least, who are educated, intelligent, informed, and angry because their kids are being cheated. That's it.
Anyone else?
I'd like to echo the sentiments we just heard. It's a tough act to follow. I have prepared a letter that I'd like to submit into the
Please state your name for the record.
Chris Ayala, Precinct 3. Again, like the last two speakers, I asked the council to reject the proposed budget. The proposed budget presents the council and our town with a fundamental question about who we are and what we value. Not only are our schools not getting the funding they requested, not only are they not getting the funding levels they negotiated with the town manager's office, not only are they not getting level funded, but in fact the budget falls hundreds of thousands of dollars short of providing the same level of education that they provided last year. At the same time, the interim town manager has proposed some large discretionary pay raises for some of the highest paid management level staff in this town. This includes a roughly $16,000 a year raise for himself in his other position with the town. Even in the best of times, if approved by the council, this would send a clear message that we value increases in wealth for the best compensated employees of our town over the education of our children. Even in the best of times, this proposal would look like a clear conflict of interest. It would send a strong message that the interim town manager is putting his own financial interests before those of the school children in our town. It's a shame. And he should be ashamed. Unfortunately, we as a town are not in the best of times. This budget comes amidst tight financial times for the town. A large sexual discrimination judgment recently awarded against the town, and unanswered questions about how our town's leadership was responsible for, complicit in, and has responded to that fact. The council recently issued a statement on discrimination, but that statement only echoes what is already in the town charter. That statement rings empty without consequences for such actions. When members of the council make continued public statements of support for the person most responsible for the judgment, the council's statement seems meaningless. If the council approves raises for the involved individuals, the council's statement will be worse than meaningless. It may serve as a certification from the council that those employees are deserving of a raise, hampering the ability of a future town manager to make corrective actions. This proposed budget is the unavoidable moment where the council needs to make a decision about what our value system is, what our priorities are, and what consequences there will be for discriminatory behavior and a lack of leadership at the town's highest levels. Do we underfund the schools while rewarding those who exhibit bad behavior that will potentially cost the town millions of dollars? Will there be consequences for sexual discrimination in the town of Winthrop? What side of history do the members of the council wish to be on? What legacy does the council wish to leave our children? This is the council's moment to take a stand. It's our council's opportunity to shine, and I sincerely hope that that opportunity isn't missed by our honorable council members. Thank you.
Anyone else?
If I could, I'd like to submit a petition from...
For the record, Joe.
For the record, Joe Aiello, Precinct 5, sorry about that. From approximately 150 citizens. I want to make sure the council knows, we collected these 150 as a small group of us over 3 days. And we could easily have mobilized a large force to get you, I'm sure, over 1,000 signatures. There is incredible anger over the performance of this council and the performance of this town. This budget as proposed, as others have said, is preposterous. I look not only at the issue of the pay raises, which is unbelievable. But I also look for where one puts the dollars that need to be paid out to Officer Rackow as a result of the judgment. I don't see it in there. Is that magic that's gonna happen someplace in there? Don't tell me insurance, because insurance doesn't cover the whole thing. And even with insurance, the last time I looked, insurance was a profit-making enterprise. And it's just like if you're a bad automobile driver, guess what happens? Your rates go up year after year after year. You're financing it through the insurance company, it comes back to the taxpayer. Bad behavior comes back to the taxpayer. You have a choice in this budget. You can provide those pay raises to people, the very same people, when you look at the public record of the Rackow case, whose performance is abominable, and I'm prepared in future meetings to read from that public record. You will all be embarrassed because I don't believe you have read it. It doesn't seem like there have been consequences, it doesn't seem to have been outrage, it doesn't seem like you've read the employee handbook, and you certainly haven't read the Rackow file. Because if you had, you would have taken action by now. I want to get to the water and sewer rates. There is no documentation. I agree with the gentleman who spoke about water and sewer, about where that $500,000 overspend happened from. We should understand it. Why did we take a loan out for the center project when we have no center project to do? We have a financial plan for the center project that's been floating around the town council archives. It's on the town website, which is a fabrication. Do people know you're going to take multiple years of state money to improve the roads and put it 100% of it into the center project, so these crumbling roads are going to get worse over the next number of years? Have you explained that to the taxpayer? You are living in a fairy tale of incompetency of the town staff. You need to get a handle on it. I understand you're bringing in an interim town manager. This specifically requests that on any major issue before you, the middle school project, the center project, the zoning, and on, that until we have a permanent town manager who's going to be accountable over the long term, that this council take no further action. 2 weeks ago, you were presented with a request to redo zoning with 50 signatures on it. Well, here's 150 signatures. Say, don't do anything. Wait until there's a town manager. I would hope that someone would make a motion to adopt the recommendations from 150 people, not 50. And if you fail to do it, I'll come back with 500 signatures if that's what you mean. And then those 500 people will join the chorus of people who say, enough is enough, you're on the wrong side of history, you're out next time. Thank you very much.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes.
Lisa Alberghini, Precinct 6. That was a tough act to follow, as were the previous speakers, and I'd first like to say that I completely agree with and embrace the sentiments of everything that's been said already here today. I also want to strongly urge the council, as Joe just requested, to vote tonight to adopt the petition that was just submitted to you and signed by over 150 people, just as 2 weeks ago you took an action on the petition that was submitted to you then. So I presume that as you took action 2 weeks ago on that petition, you'll take some action on this petition
This is a
tonight.
little different.
So I understand
This has
it's
to be
different.
presented to the town clerk, and it has to be verified
It
before
has
we
to be
can take
stamp
it.
tested.
It's a little different.
So, I'm sorry, I was there at the last meeting, and at the last meeting, when that petition was presented, I believe, I think it was presented the day before. And I presume then that means that by the time you had your meeting, the town clerk had validated those signatures, and I also don't think that there's a number of signatures required for you to decide to take any action you want. And at that meeting, you took the action to send that recommendation to the planning board for consideration to rezone the CBD. So I'm just asking.
Provided the signatures are certified, there's a timetable before we have to have a public hearing.
Right, all I'm saying is.
Okay, but we don't have that certified yet.
That's fine. If you
Okay.
certify it and vote it,
All right.
perhaps at the next
I'm
meeting.
just telling you how it goes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the vote was taken last time before it was certified, but I'll check that back. We don't have to get into that conversation, I think, now. So the second thing is, I would request that you actually take two other motions, or somebody, one of the councilors make and adopt two other motions tonight. The first motion and vote would be that the town council today roll back the salary increases in this budget at the executive management and town hall level. You've heard a lot of testimony about how outrageous it is. I mean, in my world, even if everything's performing well, you don't get, 3, 7, 8, 10% increases. You've heard a lot of testimony, passionate testimony about how it's unacceptable, and I would like some counselor to make a motion and then the full council to vote on the issue of, in this budget, rolling back the salary increases for the department heads and at the executive level and the town, and the employees in town hall. That's the first motion I would ask you to make, someone, and vote on. The second motion I would ask somebody to make and the council to vote on would be to take all those savings and engage with those savings an outside auditor to review the performance of the CBD project in order to save our MassWorks grant, okay? And that would include questions like on what basis did we hire the engineer? Was it publicly put out to bid? How did the scope of work start? How did it evolve? Why weren't we truthful to the Commonwealth initially about what the total cost would be? I had discussions that the total cost estimated was far too low, even back when that initial MassWorks application was put together. We should ask for an extension of the grant, and we will only get that extension if we have stood up and we have shown the Commonwealth that we've had an outside auditor help looking at that whole performance, the history. There's some good history that's been recited. Document it, put it down, find out, how the engineering happened, get a real peer review. I've read the peer review, I'm in the business, it's not a peer review that's adequate. So the second motion again is I would ask you somebody make a motion to take all the savings from the rollback of those salary increases and hire an outside auditing firm to perform that, to undertake a performance review of the CBD project so that we can ask that the MassWorks grant be extended. So those are the two votes that I would ask for. And one other thing on the salary rollback, everyone said it, so it probably needn't be said again, but at the same time, we're underfunding schools. Streets and sidewalks are a mess. I promised my neighbor if I came tonight, I would ask you when Dean Ave is going to, when Quincy Ave and Dean are going to be repaid because it's ridiculous. But at the same time as we're, underfunding schools and streets and sidewalks, we're paying out, and we're paying out millions of dollars for discriminatory employment practices. We're giving raises, and it's just not what our town values should be about. The last thing I'd like to say is repeating what I said a couple of weeks ago. And I'll probably come to every meeting and repeat it, perhaps until this happens, because I just can't stand the silence. This is about zero tolerance policy on discrimination that I've asked before. And I would just say that I also have read the Rockow case and I have read the Dalrymple case. I don't know that I've been 5 minutes. The first minute was on, the mechanics and logistics of the petition. But, at the last town forum, Joe Ayala commented that there was a stunning silence by this town council in not having made a statement adopting a zero tolerance policy toward discrimination. The silence is getting more deafening, it is louder, and I would request again that town council make that statement. I had more detail on that. I will say at the last meeting, after I made this request, a couple of residents stood up and said, Winthrop was a great friendly place, we take care of our neighbors. Couldn't agree more. That's very different than a clear pattern of employment discrimination that has not been judged by me and not been judged by anyone in this room, by a court of law and judges and juries on more than one occasion. So it's lovely, someone pointed out, that an African American from Winthrop once played ball with Jackie Robinson. That's very sweet, but to equate all of us being friendly with each other to the discrimination that's taken place in our employment practices is crazy, and it's unacceptable. So I'm going to ask just one more time to please issue a statement with a zero tolerance policy toward discrimination.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Carroll, Precinct 6. I want to echo a lot of the comments that came from Lisa, Chris, and Joe. I supported that petition. My wife and I worked to get a lot of signatures on it. I supported it because I support the vote that you made last time we were all together for a town planner. I think it's essential to help us be guided through the Center Business District project and the middle school. Right now, we're kind of rudderless on both those accounts. We've had a master plan, no one's following it. We're reverted back into our camps. A planner is an important position and desperately needed. It'll help the planning board, of which I've been a member for over 7 years. The town planner is needed to guide the town through those important decisions. And most importantly, the town planner could help facilitate workshops for critical public input. The public input also needs to be balanced with expertise that we would bring in, either from the planner, he or herself, or experts brought in, so we can kind of balance that and make sure we're putting our best foot forward. But it's also, those workshops are important to build consensus. So again, we get out of our camps and kind of start working together, because it's not both of those issues, the center and the middle school, which are sometimes getting merged together, they're one and the same. They're very important for this town. They'll have long-lasting, decades of effects on it, and we could screw it up. And I continue to support this petition. The ideas behind it, it's not meant to handcuff you, it's meant to sort of focus on what I think over 100+ people think are the most important priorities, which is basically getting a full-time town manager, and as close as we can get to a full-time town planner, that would be excellent. And I hope that that process in hiring both of those individuals is transparent and is combined with a search that goes beyond our beautiful shores. I thank you for your time.
I'm Peter Gill, Precinct 2. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight regarding the budget for FY19. As a former town council president for 2 terms, I feel compelled to come before you tonight to express my concerns regarding the FY19 budget and its potential effects on the future of our beloved hometown. You have to stop on the glass. On multiple occasions over the years, the Department of Revenue consultants, as well as our outside auditors, have come up with the same statement. In fact, at the last fall forum, the outside auditor said, Winthrop does not have a spending problem. Winthrop has a revenue problem. Let me take a minute to thank and commend our department heads, our town manager, and the Finance Commission for the many hours of hard work and multiple public meetings, making difficult decisions and recommendations and priorities to address the shortfall between the budget requests and the available funding. The Finance Commission will present their suggested budget to the Council for adoption or changes before the final adoption of the budget. These deliberations, folks, are still going on. The Finance Commission has 4 more meetings this month. You're welcome to attend. Unfortunately, those meetings have not been well attended. But time is limited. In accordance with the charter, the council shall adopt the proposed budget with or without amendments by June 14th. That's 45 days after it was originally presented. Any amendments or changes cannot exceed the projected revenue. In other words, any additions to the budget must be compensated by equivalent cuts. If the council fails to take any action on June 14th, the budget will be adopted as presented. Those are charter rules. Fiscal 19 budget discussions and decisions must be mindful not only of the immediate needs of FY19, but also future unidentified needs. Given the uncertainty of the Center Business District, what are we doing? Infrastructure, development, revitalization, the middle school reuse, development, residential, commercial, the gym, home for Parks and Rec, the community center. What about other private investor-funded development? Commercial, condos? And what about the proposed new public safety building? In the recent past, through the efforts of our town staff and committees, Winthrop has seen many significant improvements, some of which have been privately funded by investors, and some have been publicly funded. The reorganization of our finance department in 2014 and 2015 produced significant financial improvement and financial stability for the town. Aggressive tax, title, and foreclosure efforts at that time, along with multiple building permits for development projects, generated one-time revenue. It's not repeating, it was one time. In that period of time, there was money that came in that's not going to come in again. It provided the resources and create stabilization accounts with specific guidelines for annual funding and expenditures. Our credit rating was greatly improved, resulting in a savings of over $8 million in interest in the new school project. The Department of Revenue had us on an on-watch list, which at the end of that period, they named us a model community. Private investors and owners have built, renovated, improved vacant, unsightly, sometimes unsafe properties, which were producing little or no tax revenue. The former post office building at Belle Isle, the Winthrop Hospital, the Dalrymple School, Temple Terepha Israel, Governor Winthrop Nursing Home, as well as many derelict, single-family homes and multi-residential buildings taken into receivership, have been transformed into useful, attractive real estate tax-producing properties. Publicly funded improvements include the new Belle Isle Bridge, the high school, middle school, Millerfield, Belle Isle, Marsh, and College Walk, streetscapes, infrastructure, and more. Right now, Winthrop is at a tipping point. What do we want the future of Winthrop to be? Do we want to continue to look at those decrepit buildings? Do we want to increase population? We have some choices and decisions to make for the future of our town. There are significant issues to be addressed, and we need to make some decisions, both short-term and long-term. We as the citizens have the obligation to let the council know our concerns and priorities. What do we want them to be? What do we think should be included in this budget? And what do we think we need to cut to accommodate these needs? Should we be seeking additional sources of revenue? What the EOS said we should. Keep in mind that the projected revenue list presented in the budget is fixed and cannot be amended. Therefore, additions to spending must be accompanied by equal cuts. What are our options as we move forward? We can encourage and support private development, vacant problem properties, turning them into attractive tax revenue producing properties. Or we could increase taxes with the Prop 2.5 override on all existing real estate, including our homes. Or we could do a combination of that smart development and increase taxes. Or we could do nothing to continue improvements and allow the existing embarrassing, unsightly, derelict, and sometimes dangerous properties continue to deteriorate. In 2008, just 10 years ago, the council was pondering the 09 budget as opposed to the 19 budget. When preparing for that, the council faced the same dilemma. There was not enough revenue to meet many important identified needs. At that time, the council, in their wisdom, produced a mechanism that was probably the most creative, transparent, democracy in action process to hear the voters and comply with their requests of the majority of the people who live in this community. The council presented a very unique Proposition 2.5 override ballot. The ballot allowed the voters at large to express their priorities to the council for the final adoption of the budget. 10 items were listed with a specific amount of money for each item. The voters had the right to vote individually, yes or no, on those 10 items. The voters voted overwhelmingly yes on eight out of those 10 items. That therefore produced additional revenue to fund the necessary things for Winthrop. Yes, the voters were heard. They were heard on specific. The question of the school, the question of the police, the question of the fire, without getting into detail. Should it be determined that there is inadequate funding for FY19, I urge the council to to investigate the feasibility of the same strategy, to hear from all those citizens who want the budgetary concerns, and ask them, are you willing to invest? And I say invest because it is an investment in the future of our community. Do you want an override? Can we afford an override? Or can we afford not to have an override?
You're here.
I understand that we can't run a Prop 2.5 before, 1 second. We can't run it right now. However, we can run it shortly after the budget passes and then reinstate it. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good luck on the budget.
Anyone else? Julie?
Hi, Julia Wellers, 143 Morton Street, Precinct 2. Let's just slap her mom, not having my kids here tonight. I first want to say that I don't envy your position tonight because you as individuals didn't get us into this mess. But you collectively can take steps to get us out of it. And some of those steps have been proposed tonight by some of my friends here with help of this petition. And I think I want to echo the sentiment of my friends tonight about the schools. And a lot of us are new here to town. We have babies, toddlers, kids in preschool, kids just entering the public schools. We have a lot at stake. It's really easy for this to be very emotional. And I hope that you understand that and that take that very seriously. I think that underscores our need to get ourselves organized, to do a little internal house cleaning so that we have the skills that we need to get the professionals that we need to guide us through what has been and will continue to be a very complex and challenging process in the center. And we all know we need that infrastructure, we need that development, we need that revenue for our schools, our greatest public asset, but we need qualified experts to manage those construction bids, those contracts, to make sure, most importantly perhaps, that the residents are informed about what's going on and that they understand why it's happening, so they don't feel steamrolled like clearly the residents in the center have, so that they don't have to go out and petition to roll back zoning that they probably don't understand. Zoning by petition is dangerous. Let's invest in our efforts to get a permanent town manager, a skilled land use planner. Most of you know I went to planning school. It's not just about development and building, it's about vision, creating a shared vision and pursuing that vision. It's about process, making sure that we're all on board with that process. So these are two things I think that we have lacked in the past. So I support the petition. I helped to collect names for that petition tonight because I want us to understand that it's not a handcuff on growth, and that was a lot of people's concerns for signing it. It's not saying stop, it's not a halt, it's hold on. Let's take a breath, let's stack our tool belt right so that we can do this right, so that we get the results that we need. Our schools depend on it, our future as a community depends on it, we all depend on it. And while we're at it, something that would help a lot is to get that Human Rights Commission to institutionalize inclusion rather than discrimination. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Kurt Millar, Precinct 2. I took a quick look at the budget. I get to look at budgets on a regular basis. And I don't know about you guys, I don't know how long you've had it, but if you've only received it in the past couple of weeks, you probably have a lot more looking into and diving into. When you get a budget, you got to look at what needs to be cut when you're over budget. Streamlining, one thing I looked at was streamlining the payroll budget. Are there positions being utilized on luxury items or perk items throughout the town instead of focused projects that are needed? Are there luxury or items for appearance first instead of necessity that are being funded? I just, a quick glance through it, and I just started picking things out, and of course, I pick on the ferry, sorry if everybody likes it. I dropped right to page 103 and said, okay, one day this will be off a line item, we don't have to worry about it, and the town resource can be put towards, utilized in a much better form of what the town needs right now. Person's an intelligent person, probably could be utilized better. Are there ways to merge the departments? I look at that. And then simple things like, there was an online thing about getting turnout gear for the fire department. It wasn't funded, and now all of a sudden it's funded. for, the way we understood it. It's little things like that do you guys actually have enough time to really go through this, and really line by line, go through it and have the time to say, you know what, this we can't do right now. That's a luxury thing. That's on our wish list. I don't know, like I said, I looked at a few things and some are questionable in my opinion. I'd hope you put a halt on school budget. Yeah, that needs some more support. It really does. But for certain line items in there, me looking at the payroll budget, for me, that's a first where I would start looking. Just throwing it out there.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Bill Schmidt, Precinct 6, current chair of the Board of Health. I'd like to address 3 issues that are of concern to me in the upcoming budget. There are small items relatively, but important ones. They're the operation of the Board of Health itself, the request for a part-time public health nurse, and the position of a public health emergency preparedness coordinator. Past fiscal year has been busy for the Board of Health, particularly with a new regulation restricting the sale of tobacco products in the community. The next fiscal year promises to be busy as well, including a possible need to develop a regulation regarding the adult use and sale of marijuana products. Of course, that will depend upon any action taken by the Town Council and the voters of Winthrop. I'd like to also greatly state my appreciation for the support and encouragement that the Board of Health has received from the Town Council during the past year. In addition, I want to welcome the recent appointment of Dr. Astrid Wines by the Town Council to complete our board's membership, along with Susan McGuire, registered nurse. For the operation of the Board of Health, there are 2 very small but important requests in the budget next year. $1,000 in the Public Health and Clinical Services Department budget for conferences and training, such as those offered by the Mass Association of Health Boards and the Massachusetts Health Officers Association. $500 in the Inspectional Services Department budget for mailings, postage, and stationery and other office supplies. What you might not realize is currently the Board of Health has no budget to train any conferences and trainings, so we don't have the ability to go to these types of things. And also, we didn't have the ability to do certified mailings, for instance, when we did the tobacco regulation. So, as it turned out, I went around to all the 20 or so stores and delivered them myself. I'd also appreciate the Town Council's consideration of a couple other requests. One is that for a part-time public health nurse. With the acting director of the Public Health Department functioning primarily in administrative capacity, there actually is a growing number of disease cases in the community that require nursing care and skill. The need for a consistent nurse in the department will require more than the $2,500 allocated in the Health Department budget. I would appreciate the Town Council's consideration of the $15,600 request for a 10-hour-a-week position. And lastly, for the position of Public Health Emergency Preparedness Coordinators, there's a request for $12,400 in the budget for the Public Health and Clinical Services Department. I strongly advocate for this funding to meet the need for an on-call 24/7, 365 days a year position. The case for this position has never been more evident than what's occurred during the past year. There's a tremendous need to recognize the importance of a leader to respond to emergencies in all kinds of weather as a professional employee, not merely as a qualified volunteer. I do understand the difficult fiscal time that the town is facing. However, I am sincerely, and I truly believe this from my conversations with people, I'm very concerned that without demonstrating the importance of this vital work in the town budget, the core of volunteers right now who is doing this work may drift away. I appreciate your consideration of these requests. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Hearing none, anyone from the council? Hearing none, I'll close out this public hearing on the FY19 budget. Public comment.
This is back on what I was talking about earlier. I just didn't want to run over the time limit. A couple things in these reasonings for the increase. So one of them is projects in Winthrop Center and Winthrop Short Drive, which is nearly $1 of the rate increase. What I understand, the work in Winthrop Center was handled by a grant, wasn't it? And the work on Winthrop Short Drive, that's DCR. I mean, DCR owns it, so they're paying for it.
That's not true. That's not true.
Then they should be. I mean, they own it.
The water main we own.
All right. I stand corrected.
The incentives, the grant is about a fraction of the cost of the project. Just want to get the truth.
Okay, then you would know the answer to this other question. 26 cents is, among other things, a new dump truck. But then it says in the budget, there's a DPW truck and a police cruiser. Are those two trucks the same truck?
No, they're different.
The two separate trucks? And the one that's being bought for the water sewer department will be strictly used under enterprise fund rules, strictly used for water sewer.
That's correct.
Just want to make sure. Just be ashamed if it's going to be sitting idle a lot of time. It could easily be rented from the DPW.
No, not easily. Not the type of truck that we need.
Anyone else wish to be heard on the public comment?
Joe Aiello, Precinct 5. I'd like to get back to the Town Center project again, if I could. I share Lisa Alberghini and other people's concern about the serious potential that we could lose the just under $3 million MassWorks grant for that project. I believe that we today still don't know how we're going to implement that project. I've said this before, we don't have a construction phasing plan. Until you have a construction phasing plan, you don't have a cost estimate. We've never seen the surface restoration project. You're going to put people through 2 years of pretty difficult times with a lot of mud and dirt, including the Center Business District, without understanding of what their conditions are going to look like throughout the entire period of construction. And even more importantly, what the surface is going to look like when all is said and done, so people can proudly invest in their properties and continue to grow and thrive their businesses. In order to save that grant, we need to be able to explain to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts where we went wrong. We need to get someone to look at source material. You need an outside auditor and independent mindset. If you fail to do that, we are going to lose $2.6 million. Beyond that, you're going to act to request that the citizens of this town help pay for some of the other portions of that project. I can't imagine, without being able to describe how you got there and then how you're going to implement well, that the citizens of this town will vote for it. I know I won't. And I voted for every override that has happened since I've been here, since 1982. It is just a different story I hear every single time. It was the previous administration. Well, most of the people here were here with the previous administration, right? Let's just get the facts out. Let's get an independent analysis. Let's get it documented. And let's use the money, as Lisa described, get rid of the pay raises, and let's fund that important audit. Because without that project going well, kiss the middle school redevelopment goodbye, kiss the center revitalization goodbye. Peter Gill talked about growth, and perhaps smart growth, I think was a term he used, focused around the center, intelligent growth. You can kiss all that goodbye. That project is the core of what we want to do if we're going to have economic growth and get out of the constant financial problems that we represent today. So I have never heard a response from any counselor for me saying this 4 times. I'm not the only one that has said this 4 times. I would hope someone speaks up at some point and says, hey, geez, that crazy guy might have a good idea. That would be helpful, right? And have you folks act on it. I also want to say one other thing, which is that I want to be sure when we post people's names, one of whom is a very close friend of mine, who have debts to this town of less than $400, they're held up for ridicule, when there are other enterprises and individuals on those lists who are not publicized for own back taxes and backwater and sewer rates. Okay? Because supposedly they have a workout plan. Well, let's get some transparency. It's great that people have a workout plan. Well, let's print everybody and let's show what everybody's there. You're going to embarrass a friend of mine who owes less than $400 while there are folks out there that have owed $25,000, $75,000 in institutions as well that owe this kind of money? When we're desperate for money? Publish it all. I don't understand the hesitancy here. Okay? If we're gonna be transparent, and I believe that's the word I hear every one of you say when you speak, transparent, that's transparency, folks. Print it all. Don't embarrass the little guy. Thank you.
I'll just address one of your concerns, and that's the center, okay? We have been in constant contact with the state relative to the funding, whether it's carried over, whether it's delayed, or whatever. So we know exactly what we're doing, Joe, as far as the center project. That's number one. As far as the funding is concerned, it's very secure, and we have constant discussions with them. That's number one. Number
You
two.
have a finance plan for the project?
Can I just finish? You asked the question.
Sure.
I'm just telling you that
I
we're.
just wanted to clarify about your answer.
I didn't say we had a report. I just wanted to make sure that you understand that we're in constant contact with the state about the funding and about any loss of funding.
Good.
Right now, it's very secure. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I don't know if you were paying attention, but yesterday we had a special town council meeting. Did you know that?
I have a job.
I'm just asking the question. You asked us a question, I'm just asking you a
I was
question.
unaware.
We appointed a town manager last night, not an interim town manager, a town manager that'll be serving for the next 90 days, and possibly longer, depending on how long it takes us to get our permanent town manager.
Can I ask a question about that?
Can I finish?
That sounds interim
Can I
to me,
finish?
but-
Did I interrupt you, Joe?
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Cressman, who is here this evening,
Yep.
has got over 40 years' experience, okay, in the business. He's one of the reasons we hired him, because he's had experience doing all types of projects within communities. So now he's analyzing the center project and will make recommendations to the council whether we should continue it, whether we should scrap it, whether we should combine it with something else. So, to show the picture or trying to portray the picture that we're sitting on our you-know-whats here is false, okay? That's all I have to say.
And just another clarification, I have yet to see the source documentation I've asked for how the project got from its initial concept in the hiring of an engineer to 3 million to 4 million. These are the numbers that have been in the press, published by the town, to 4 million, to 7.8 million, to 9.3 million, to 12.6 million.
I think we've gone
Still
over
not
it
there.
several times, Joe.
not
We've
on-
gone over it several
It's not
times.
online,
Yeah,
it's not online, and there's not the source documentation. And until that is produced, I don't think the citizens of this town can have confidence that they know where the project is. I've asked, is there a construction phasing plan?
You
It's
don't put
still
up-
not on.
How do you have a construction phasing plan if you don't put up for an RFP first? How do
That's
you,
what- Can I just clarify? There is no project like this that is put to market without first consulting with the affected neighbors about how the contractor ought to proceed. Do we want pile driving at 3 in the morning? No, we don't. You therefore have limitations on hours of work. Do we want to have sidewalks dug up and plywood over them in front of all of the businesses for 2 years? I'm sure we don't, but there's gotta be a standard. When I dig up a sidewalk, there'll be a restored concrete sidewalk by a certain number of time. That's called a construction phasing plan. You determine what the community's values are, what the community's needs are, you put that into the specifications, it's very clear, everybody understands when you're gonna lose parking, how much parking you're gonna lose, for how long you're gonna lose it, and you put that into specification. If you leave it up to the contractor's gonna think he's in the middle of Iowa, I'm in a cornfield, I'm gonna dig everything up and leave everything a mess all night long. Then you go back to the contractor and say, Jesus, this is terrible, the neighbors are screaming. Contractor says, well, tell me how you want to do it. Ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. I'm going to hit you with a claim, a change order, request, all that stuff. You don't have competitive pricing for that approach. So nobody who knows this business would ever suggest you put the RFP out to a contractor like the contractor decides he's going to build it. Doesn't ever make sense. It doesn't happen in any other town. It's not the right way to go. It shows how lost we are with this project that the council should suggest such a thing.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes, Tom Riley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tom Riley, Precinct 5. I just wanted to touch on the petition that was filed 2 weeks ago, and that stands. The petition was filed under two provisions. The first one, the petition, under the zoning law, which allows 10 citizens to approach the planning board with a request for an amendment or a rezoning of a piece of property, and have that go to the planning board for recommendation and then be submitted to the council for the council's action. The second way in which the petition was filed is under a section of the charter which allows citizens to approach the council with 50 signatures. Under that section, the council has 3 months to act on the petition. So I don't think that the two petitions, the petition you've heard alluded to earlier, and the zoning petition, are necessarily in conflict. In fact, I believe that we can begin it, but we want to begin some kind of a review. The neighbors do not believe that they had a role or a stake in the zoning changes that were adopted 4 years ago. I don't want to debate why that happened or whether even that's a good idea, but they certainly don't feel that they were afforded the opportunity. You've heard from one neighbor who said, I never knew that immediately next to me, a multi-unit building could be built 15 feet from my property line. The zoning law stands in completely outside the norms for any zoning throughout the rest of the town. So the neighbors in the center area would be dealing with multi-unit buildings closer to their homes, of higher density, more apartments, less parking than any other spot in the community. People say, well, we need the development. Well, if we need the development, let's have it everywhere. Why should it be confined to one neighborhood? But we can discuss all of that stuff later. I just want to be sure that the zoning changes and what I think is a necessary conversation and dialogue, working together to try to come up with something that's an improvement over what's on the books right now, doesn't get shot with the budget, the setup project, the construction, and a number of other issues. The second thing is we are moving ahead with the search for the town manager. The committee that was appointed by Council President Sanford, reappointed in large part, but many of the same members by Council President Vecchia, will be reviewing applications. There's a deadline of applications for next Sunday. Immediately after that, the Commerce Center will submit materials to the committee for our review. We will make decisions about who we ought to interview, make a recommendation. Hopefully, we will put 3 names before the Council President. That's the goal. Council President is a very active participant in that process. He's got a tough job to do in the end to try to put a name before the council. The committee's there to help him, to assist him, give him some support in trying to streamline that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Yeah, just real quick, Julie Wallers, Precinct 2. I just want to invite you all to the Spring Pedal and Picnic this Sunday. Bike Winthrop, as you know, is a new organization, and we are here to celebrate and promote biking as a free, fun, affordable, healthy form of transportation that also happens to be very sustainable, also happens to provide people real options to driving. We're not here to force anyone out of their car en masse, but simply to give people an option. Try it. So we're having these fun rides to get people together. It's going to be at Ingleside Park Sunday at 4 o'clock at the gazebo. We'll ride around the maze, come back, great tunes, a DJ, Cuzzy, pizza. This is a community event. We're trying to have fun. Biking is a great way to do that. Who knows, maybe people will even try it as a way to get around town. You know, we've got dockless bikes coming. Yes, we are going to see bikes all around our town. It's not going to be mayhem. It's going to be fun if we do it right. So events like this are a way to get people excited, and when they see those bikes, not to say, get those off the streets, but, ooh, what happened if I tried that? Where could I go? And creating no pollution, creating no traffic, and needing no parking. So I hope you will join us on Sunday. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Lisa Alberghini, Precinct 6. It's really hard to follow Julia, especially. She's so upbeat always and awesome. So, but I had no intention of speaking again. I'll try to be brief, but the last conversation made me feel compelled to. It sounds as though you said we've hired a permanent town manager for 90 days, or until we can hire a permanent town manager. I understand that that person is charged with doing a review of the CBD. I think that, again, I would still say we should have an outside review, and at a very minimum, whatever is found along the way, and hopefully along the way to an outside review, is that that's transparent, that people have an opportunity to see it before any recommendations made to town council and town council votes on anything. I have to respectfully disagree. I think the council president said that we talked about this history a number of times. I agree, what we've heard, and I know that Department Head Calla has talked about this. I've heard a 5 to 8 minute description, roughly, maybe 5 to 10 or 12 or 15 minute description about the fact that the initial scope was drainage underground, and then at some point there were sidewalks and streets added, and at some point there was something else added, and I get that, and I have heard that 3 or 4 times. I don't think that's what we're talking about in terms of understanding both how this evolved and how complete the scope is. Joella always talks about construction management plan. As I think everyone knows, my favorite thing to wonder about is the peer review. It's peer review in name because someone used the words in a one-page letter and put it on the website, but it's not the kind of peer review I think that we need to have take place before we do. And I say that both to the interim or permanent town manager and the council. We need to have much better peer review and understanding of it before this would go out to bid. And the last just point I would make on that, it does not take into account anything related to climate change. From what I can tell, I've looked at the plans. I've had an engineer who works with me look at the plans. There are a lot of pieces of that in the scope, even as it is today, that aren't, we don't account for a lot of important things. So I'm still going to urge us to do an outside independent review. In the interim, anything that we can learn, I think would be great, and it should be transparent and reported to the residents. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Wendy Millard Page, Precinct 2. In reference to something that Joe said earlier, I no longer have an invested interest necessarily in Winthrop Center businesses. However, my nickname is Winthrop Wendy. So I am very passionate about what happens here. And a lot of the voices of the folks who own the businesses in the center are very concerned about the impact that every time we do any construction, water gets stopped. We know electricity is going to be cut off. They may not have gas for a day. It's not necessarily a reflection on the work that's being done, but it's the fact that they don't know it in advance enough to prepare so that their business can get a delivery at the right time, or they may not have water that day. So as this moves forward, I would highly recommend to every counselor to make sure that they've spoken to those businesses, because the financial impact and the potential loss for those businesses is huge. And if we can't support the businesses that already exist and we start losing them, we're in serious trouble.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Hearing none, I'll close out public comment, and we'll take an adjournment for 10 minutes.
It's 5:30.
Next item on the agenda is correspondence. We did receive 7 emails, which I will not read, but they were all relative to the budget. Each one of the councils will get a copy of these letters from citizens regarding the budget. Under committee reports, finance, Jim, this is your favorite subject.
Finance Committee met this evening, and we just had a meeting. Basically, we didn't have anything on the agenda except just the 2019 budget, just to try to get everybody on board and online and understand the process and what's going on, and just asking anybody if anybody had any questions. The majority of the questions centered around the school budget, and looking from the original request down to the superintendent has trimmed it somewhat, and there's still a shortfall. And, there's still concern about if there's anything we could do to try to change that shortfall. So there was much discussion about the schools. There's also motions coming tonight with capital items that were originally in the 2019 proposed budget, but were subsequently taken out because of revenue shortfalls. So those are now on the agenda tonight under new business, and I had asked if we could have, there were similar motions from the school budget that were in their original budget but taken out, and they moved to capital request, so I have asked for those to also be submitted to us, because I think they deserve the same, attention as the town capital needs do. So hopefully those will be coming to us tonight. And that was it. The meeting lasted about 35 minutes, and there will be obviously another finance committee before our next council meeting to address the issues that are going to be coming before us later in new business. And that's it.
Thank you, sir. Millerfield?
And on Millerfield met last week, I think May 10th, and there were basically 3 items on Millerfield. One was just to get an update on the track and the painting of the track, which will be done the week of, I want to say, between June 19th and June 26th, something like that. So the surface will be painted I think it's a red color, and it will be restriped and everything else. The other questions were about the field house, which it all seems like the the vocational school is on board. They're very much looking forward to trying to help us with this project. There's a lot of discussion about it. We want to try to stay on some sort of time frame. They're limited in their scope of work, that they have to check in at school, then they have to be driven down here, so it's really like a 3.5-hour day for them to actually work. But the goal is to have that field house ready for September of 2019, and the committee feels that any shortfalls that aren't done by the spring, we would just take care of ourselves so we can meet that deadline. So they're very excited about the field house. We hope to have the slab, all the underground plumbing done over the summer, so in September, when school starts for the vote, the kids can come down and do the project, and they're very, very, very excited about that. And the last item we discussed was the turf. There's been some issues or complaints or thoughts about and I don't know all the technical terms, but the turf we have has an infill. The infill, it either comes in rubber pellets or it comes in this cork fill, which is what we chose. It's a cork and coconut fill. I think it's coconut or whatever it is. And that was put in the fall. And, it was spread out, and they know the certain amount to spread out, and they spread it out. And then it has to be groomed throughout a process. And with the exceptional amount of rain that we've received and damp weather, the cork is very absorbent, or the coconut is very absorbent. And once it's absorbent, it falls deeper into the fibers, and it's harder to rake out. Long story short, we have the company, FJ Webb, I think is their name, or whatever their name is. And they will be coming back. It's an ongoing process. It's much better if it's hand raked, and you want to get, when you're looking from above, that should look like a finely manicured lawn, and we still feel that there are patches that aren't very green, that are more cork and fill. So over the summer, especially as the weather gets drier, hopefully, and warmer, it's good because it will reduce the amount of absorption level in the coconut, and that will be spread out, and that should be all set for the fall also. So basically all good, just items ongoing. That's it for Millerfield.
Precinct 4 community meeting?
Yes, we had a Precinct 4 community meeting on May 2nd. It was well attended and a great discussion. The primary concern raised by residents, I would say, are the condition of our roads and sidewalks and the need for infrastructure repairs. Dean Street in the Highlands is a problem and needs to be addressed. We talked about the recent flooding that we've had. The other concerns that residents had were the enforcement of speed limits and traffic signs and things like that. We also discussed the need for improved bus service in the Highlands, particularly to Seal Harbor and Fort Heath, and that residents were very clear that that's something that they would like to explore further.
Very good, Councilor. Community dog park meeting, Councilor McDuffie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. The Dog Park Committee, Citizens Committee met on the 10th at the Lyceum Room in E.B. Newton. Wasn't quite as big of an attendance this time as the last meeting, where there was a lot of people who were against certain regions, certain locations that they wanted to discuss. So we've narrowed it down to 3 locations, and we tried to expand on that a little bit and see what the 3 options would be. We measured the sizes of each and what the what the capacity would be for each location. And as a group, they're going to try to vote on their website online. We're also trying to establish officers within the group, within the citizens group, so that there's point people on each aspect of the committee, construction, fundraising, and then president, and also we're looking into grant money. The goal is to not impact the town budget at all, to fund it themselves. We do know there's some money allocated by the town council prior to my involvement with the group, and we will try to utilize that money. But aside from that, the goal is to impact the town minimally with maintenance and also with the initial costs. The three locations are the Hannaford Park location, the Lewis Lake location, and the DPW area adjacent to the cemetery. Right now, the consensus is to go and try to get the permitting and the process running on the DPW location. I also met with Kara Campbell the week before to visit the three sites and see what the impact would be on the Conservation Committee Council. And so she met with the Concom the very next day, and they gave a kind of a general overview of their opinion of each location and the pros and cons. It appears that each one has its individual issues. I guess everybody's pretty much aware of that. This has been going on for a long time. But it seems that we're probably going to try to push for getting permitting for the DPW location and whatever that's involved. The size of it is the best. The Lewis Lake location appears to be more impactful for the environment, negative environment. So that's what was discussed, and that was pretty much it.
Thank you, Council.
Council President.
Any questions? Yes.
Council Duffy, I just have a question on the dog park. Are there going to be like posted hours, because there's a school right there, an elementary school,
Yeah.
and the traffic gets very, very heavy.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You know, I mean,
it's a good point, and we talked about that it would be limited accessibility 2 times a day. I don't know if they would be necessarily posted times, but I think they'd be aware pretty quickly of the limitations and the accessibility for that reason. But that's a great point, and of course it was discussed.
Yeah, I might add too that in the group that we mentioned that since the school traffic is pretty excessive, that people would self-select themselves out anyway, because they'll know, they'll do it once and see the loop and say, forget it, I'm never driving down here again at this time. So I can't imagine that there would be that many people who would want to fight that traffic just to walk their dog. Most people would just walk there anyway.
Okay. Any other comments? Thank you. Town manager report.
Good evening. Again, the budget, we know there is significant priorities in every department. Our job is to deliver a balanced budget. And we did that, and every department had some reduction. Police, fire, DPW, library, and of course, the schools, as we heard here today. About process, I don't think people understand how intertwined the school's superintendent is with the town manager's office. It's not one time we get a note from her and this is what your request is. And we've worked with her and we continue to work with her to meet her needs out of this year's budget and also out of next year's budget. If anyone wants to question my ability to work with the schools, just look at the track record that we've developed the most secure schools in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Much to do with Speaker DeLeo's earmarks and a collaboration between the police department and the superintendent's office. And we will continue to increase that security as we get that grant money made available to us. So our commitment is not to leave the schools. It's not a town versus school fight like it was in 2008 and 2009. And we can't start bringing that mentality back as we go through this budget process. We're one town, we have one budget process, and we support one another. Do I wish we could give the schools the $2.2 million that they requested? Sure. I wanted to give the fire department what they requested? Absolutely. Deputy Goodwin put in a request for the police department? Absolutely. But we couldn't. So our job was to deliver a balanced budget, and that's what we did. As far as, I'm not going to get into contracts and obligations out of that budget. That's certainly something, the process is now turned over to you, and you can amend a budget, and as long as the amendment comes with a reduction, an increase and a reduction. That's per charter. So the superintendent and I will continue to work together as we move forward, regardless of the decisions and where the cuts are coming from. If there's an increase in her budget, that shouldn't and will not impact the day-to-day operational level cooperation with the schools. So I'm proud to have worked with Lisa over the last 9 months, and prior to Lisa with John Massero on creating wonderful schools. There's nothing more important to me than children and the elderly. Those are the two most vulnerable populations, and I take that commitment seriously. And you know, I have a certain interest in the school's success, since I have 2 children in the schools. And you know, I don't want everyone to go away with, well, he's a police officer and he took care of the police department. The police department budget went up by 0.03% on the totality. So that certainly wasn't the case. I did cut the police department. We did take and transfer capital expenses from the DPW police and the turnout gear for the fire department, which wasn't funded last year. Again, he wanted to fund it in this year's budget, and we couldn't do it, but that's what we have the capital stabilization for. So when we can't fund certain capital outlay projects, that we have that stabilization. Is it best left untouched? I think Mr. Cressman and I both agree, yes, we can not touch it and use our budget money for those things. We certainly want to. So we have a good stabilization funds, so our bond rating doesn't decrease and our bond rating stays stable, because it affects our borrowing for the Millis Field project, and also it affected our borrowing for the high school project in a positive way, because our bond rating was significantly increased since the 2008 2009 years. So we welcome any discussion, and certainly the new town manager will manage the budget as voted by the council. The MVP,
Terry?
Yes.
I would just like, if I may, to echo what Chief Delahanty has said. This is not a process that Chief Delahanty and I stepped into a couple of weeks ago, thought about the school's budget, talked a few times about what I need, what he needs, what the children of Winthrop need. This has been a process that's been ongoing since I stepped through the door in July, in my first interaction with Chief Delahanty, around the needs of the children of our school district, all 2,000 of them, as well as our teaching staff, our coaches, and our volunteers, right down to our crossing guards. There's probably nobody else in this town that I would have more communication with than the town manager, and I don't think that's typical in most communities, that you have the undivided attention of the town manager. His training of me around understanding the town side and how the monies are spent on the town side, and his willingness to work with me to come up with creative solutions and bring a different light to me in terms of what the police department as well may have to offer the school in grant funding, in additional support systems for our staff. We had a few incidents this year where our staff was requiring some support, some counseling support around some issues with our students, and without the police department being able to step up to the plate and help us, I'm not so sure what we would have done. So when we talk about the creation of this budget, the FY19 budget, it's been an ongoing budget development since July, while we tore through the current budget, the FY18 budget, and looked at efficiencies and looked at collaborative ways to do things. Sort of entered into the real estate market in terms of Miller Field. So Miller Field is still under the town at this point until that project is completed. And there have been endless amounts of hours that Terry has given to me to try to figure out how our kids could make use of that field, how it could be compliant with Title IX, how we could have our family access that town, keep our kids safe with ongoing construction, and his willingness to work side by side with me to cut costs, to make sure we had the appropriate, we talk about toilets for 3 days straight. Who does that? Who sits with the superintendent and talking about how many toilets we're gonna need per person, and gives me some feedback about what he knows about other town projects. So I echo what Terry has to say. I hope the community understands. I understand the fiscal limitations of the town. It's not my first time in looking at overall town budgets and hearing about them through my father since I was probably 5. And so I do understand the constraints of the town. My job is to advocate for the students of the Winthrop Public Schools, to look at the budget, to create efficiencies, to maximize the use of our dollars, and to make sure our students get an equivalent education, pre-K through high school and beyond, for those students with disabilities that require attention until the age of 22. I want our kids to be in line with other communities that have either more or things that are different than we have, and I will never stop advocating for that. However, I do understand that there are limitations in the community, and I feel very strongly that Chief Delahanty and Michael and I have worked to look at every possibility. I appreciate the work that they've done, and just feel strongly that you need to know that our relationship is very strong and will continue to be strong, because I continue to work with the police and the fire and DPW and the rest of the town departments. We are one large department, and we just happen to have different roles. So, just so you know.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
It's just important because we've lived that life already of them versus us, everyone competing. And it deteriorates the organization as a whole from the inside. So we got to leave those things to the exterior, not the interior. Speaking of Millis Field, I was concerned with some deterioration of sidewalks on the Millis Field side of Cross Street. I brought it to the attention of the Millis Field chair. Vinnie Crossman had the contractors out to look at it, and it was determined to be the salt that we used. There was areas where the salt must have extended over the sidewalks from the street, and those are the areas. So it's not from poor workmanship, but it's from our salting activities in that street. So I did ask Steve Calligis to confirm that, to make sure that that analysis is something that's accurate with him before we agree to, and some of it's out of warranty anyway because it was done with the school and not with Millis Field. So, but I was concerned with it when I was walking my dog with my wife, and I just wanted to try to get it resolved. And it was also nice to see while we're out walking the entire field being used and spectators there for their first track meet in 15 years. 11 years. It was very crowded. It was a beautiful day, and the people in Winthrop were all enjoying it, and so it was nice to see it finally complete and actually occupied on a more regular basis.
We actually recognized Pat McGee for over 36 years as a coach to the boys at the high school, and it was a well-attended event for something that didn't get too much advertising. It was really great to see all the activity and all the folks that showed up. It was a great day.
Council President, could I ask a quick question,
Sure.
going back to the sidewalks? What did it look like near Miller Field when you were saying that the sidewalks?
They were pitted.
Okay.
So there was one up by where the visitors entrance used to be, and there was another pad down by the golf course end.
Okay. There are sidewalks that are relatively new on Nahant, Sewell, where Nahant changes into Sewell, that are maybe 4 years old. They're not very old, and those are also all pitted out. And I've noticed the new sidewalks in several places in the community have those same pits. It's caused by the salt. How do we prevent that going
That's
forward?
what the contractor said. I asked DPW Director Calla to confirm that analysis to see. And I'm not a salt expert, but he sees what salt does to cement into his roadways, so we can ask him to look up at Sewell as well.
Okay, because they're relatively new sidewalks and they're totally pitted out, and so it doesn't make, I don't know if we need to sort of change up the salt or change up the cement we're using.
I just want to speak to both of that quickly. Both of those sidewalks, Nahant was actually done back in 2011, so it's been a while. But both of the sidewalks in the areas that the chief is referring to on Cross Street, they were both poured very late in the season. Cement takes a while to cure, That's why I think that the area on Cross Street, those two areas were poured, not as part of the full pour that initially happened. And my guess is that they weren't fully cured, the winter set in, and the salt had more of an effect on it. I will tell you that the road salt, that residents like to come down and take from the salt shed, and we allow them to take it. We caution them about, putting them on cement, but, a lot of them want to use it for asphalt in their driveway, which is fine. But some of that salt does inadvertently get spread in front of their homes, and it is harsh for cement. It's not meant for cement, especially cement that is not fully cured, which I believe that portion of Nahant again was about, I believe it was an October or November pour. That, and again, it was back in 2011.
Because the sidewalk that was installed in like 1905 is in better shape than some of the new sidewalks.
Usually the case. The old stuff stands by as longer than the new stuff.
Well, anyways, my point is just that we ought to take a look at how things are being, if there's a way to improve that a little bit so that the sidewalks hold up a little bit better.
Absolutely. There's been issues with rodents. LG has a request in to fully fund the rodent trapping and baiting systems to help with the problems around the different areas of town.
They're springing up everywhere from the phone calls I'm getting.
Yeah, I discussed it with Al earlier, told him the Court Road down the point, in the center's always been a constant issue.
Is it on the harbor side all the way around town? I don't know that
The water side is certainly, we're seeing an influx on, between the point and Circuit Road, which the body of waters are on the point on both sides, and Circuit Road's on the bay side coming into Belle Isle outlet. So certainly it would appear that to be the case. But Al, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, basically, in 2016, I think you remember, Councilor Theory remembers down the center when we had the drought and we were overrun by rats. So basically at that point, we baited all those areas, we attacked them pretty aggressively and we knocked them down. And then said, then we'd have in our budget like $8,000 a year and we do rat patrol straight out through the town. Page's extermination company, they do different, experiments, the baiting area, so much baiting is being used, kind of determine how many rats in that area, and they do that throughout the town. So basically what I think has happened is, we've knocked them down pretty good, but just remember we've had a lot of flooding. And the flood waters have rised, it's gonna move them, it's gonna bring them out, and you're gonna see a lot of rat infestation. So what we're doing now is we have a motion in, or most likely you guys hopefully will approve the motion, we'll move forward, we'll start baiting all those areas, and we'll really monitor those areas to make sure that we knock them down again. And that's, that's how we did it last time, it worked really well. We also have to keep in mind that any conservation areas, conservation doesn't like any type of baiting in those areas. The only thing that we use is trap snaps. What happens with those is any small dog, a cat gets near them, potentially could, snap on them and it would probably most likely kill them. So that's, what we face. We'll aggressively in the next upcoming month pursue this, knock them down, and also be mindful on how we bait, where we bait, and make sure that we're spending our money in the right areas also.
Good. Yes.
I have a question. We know that Massport is always expanding their runways and doing all kinds of work there. Are they helping us at all with any of this, like the rat baiting and trapping? I mean, they could be coming from there across the harbor and coming in to Winthrop.
There's no funding in place. There's no grants or anything out of Massport for what we're doing.
I wonder if somebody could reach out to them and say, they could possibly be coming from your expansion and different things like that. But usually when you start developing or digging or whatever, they move around.
Anyone else?
Just two events to announce. Of course, the Memorial Day events will be coming up at the cemetery, and also a 1 p.m. event will also take place at the Winthrop Public Landing. The council will get invitations for a dedication of the landing by special legislation. The DCI will be handing the sign and doing the dedication. And then also on June 9th, There's a Special Olympics that we do every year. Last year, we had to do it in Revere. One of the police association sponsors that. We go down and volunteer and coach the kids along, and also cook for them. So anyone who wants to come down and be a spectator and cheer them along, it's certainly worth your time and effort, and they love it. So please come down and join us for that as well.
Where is that going to be?
That's at Millis Field.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think Coffee with the Cops too is at 26th of May in French Square. So we'll be announcing that as well.
What time is the cemetery service Memorial Day?
10 o'clock.
10 a.m.
Just a couple of things for the town manager. Some I've spoken to previously and talking about Massport with the rats, but also just sort of following up on what some of the public comment has been about Massport and looking at our budget and really tackling that idea that we do have a revenue problem, not a spending problem. I'm curious to see if we could get an assessment of the land that Massport uses, because the average home cost in Winthrop went up over $100,000 just last year, value. While our pilot payment in lieu of taxes agreement with Massport ends in 6 years, I think we should start being a little proactive with them and at least start asking some questions what that land is worth. And, you know, seeing if possibly we can get them to come to the table early.
I think we had the similar, the assessor's been working on getting us 3 prizes for someone to come in and assess the middle school site. We'll ask him also to get us quotes, 3 quotes for someone to be hired and come in and to assess that property of land, that segment of land that's ours.
Do we have a timetable or anything like that about when we could potentially?
I've got 2 quotes in. I got 2 quotes in today, and I'm waiting to see. We
on the middle school
reached out to 7 different appraisal firms, and we've got 2 quotes today. The other 5 haven't responded yet, so hopefully I'll get a 3rd.
And they do have to look for certain certifications, and Steve Roach knows what certifications to look for when you're appraising non-personal property and single-family homes. You need something that's a step above that.
Right. A couple other pieces here. So I got a bunch of people who wrote to me about some cleanup that happened in the center late at night. And I just wanted to know what the story was behind that, because it seems like some power equipment was being used late into the evening.
Yeah, it's certainly never our goal is to disturb people sleeping at night. I wouldn't like it myself.
Pete was down there with his.
I had nothing. I wasn't there with anything.
Certainly the center has. We have a quagmire in the center. We do it during the day and we can't get it clean. No one's happy with the job we do.
Right.
We do it at night. We have asked the DPW to be more sensitive in time with the gas blowers and stuff like that. So it certainly wasn't our intent. We're certainly not proud that it happened, but we were working to correct it and it doesn't reoccur.
Is it something that we? Do we have any particular ordinances or rules where, like, there's emergency maintenance where everyone is inconvenienced and it happens, versus something that's just general maintenance and keeping it up, where we don't want to disturb these neighborhoods at night? Do we have something in place for that, or?
No,
I'm not, can I speak to that
Sure.
real quick? I'm not sure if we actually have an ordinance in place. I believe we do. If you open page 10 of the Winthrop phone book, it actually explains the process. We have been cleaning the center for years. That paragraph states that the center business district shall not be cleaned during business hours, shall be cleaned and maintained after business hours as posted. The area was posted, which has been our protocol for the 11 years that I've been here. We have done night cleanup several times a year down in the center area. We do it up on Crest Ave as well. You're right, the blowers are allowed. They are. We simply couldn't sweep the center area in the 3 to 4 hours that we have to get it clean. So the blowers quickly blow it into the gutter line, and the sweeper comes by and sweeps when the cars aren't there. It's been a practice that we've been doing, like I said, for the 11 years that I've been here and before that. It is stated in the phone book that that's how it occurs. I can do some research to see if that is truly an ordinance. I don't know if it is or if it isn't. but it is the practice.
Yeah, I think a lot of the concern came from people who have recently bought property there, so it was the first time for them.
Sure.
So, it's just an education of mentioning to those people exactly what happened.
And we don't have, we have an ordinance that says no construction during 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. unless you have a special permit now by the town council and on Sundays. This is not that type of construction. Excavation, it's cleaning. So it certainly wouldn't fit in that ordinance, and we can check the ordinances.
Anything else?
Just a question on that similar vein, not necessarily in the center, but with timing. Trash contract. My understanding is they're not supposed to come before 7 a.m. Now, so there's the rule in the books that you can't put trash out at night, and it's happened in our house over the last couple of weeks, a couple of times that now I can't imagine where the first house they pick up, but they're there at 6:45, 6:35, they've been there. So I don't personally mind if they're early, but if you can't put it out, are you getting up at 5 in the morning? Are there rules? I know there's a contract. I'm pretty sure it says they can't start before 7. Is that true or not true?
I would defer to the DPW director. It's not his contract. He's our liaison to the trash company.
It is. The trash contract reads that trash pickup will begin at 7 a.m. There are occasions, prediction of a heavy snowstorm coming in midday. They want to get an early start, or if they anticipate not being able to clean up the next day, they're trying to get 2 routes done in one day. They typically will call us and request through the town manager's office the allowance to start early. I can certainly, reach out to Capital and tell them to be more mindful to start their routes at 7 a.m. I know their trucks leave their yard at specified times to be on the route at a specific time.
I know it's hard, and they're usually good. I've had neighbors that have put their trash out after they've come by, and they've recircled around eventually during the day, which is great and thankful of them. But it's just it's hard when you have the ordinance that you can't put it out the night before, which we understand. We just talked about rodents and everything else. It's just a hard thing, but if we could just clarify that's 7 o'clock.
Yes. So one more piece too. So, and this is more of a protocol where our last council meeting we passed that new council rule of with the finance motions.
Yes.
So I don't know. I know it usually takes a few days to get in effect. So I'm not calling the where is that one, but I see that in our new business we have all these motions. Of course, we don't have that. So I can't remember in that plan, were we thinking of having all that documentation for when it goes to the finance committee? I can't remember that one.
To be quite honest with you, I think is the concern that has been brought up by the management team is this was taken out of the budget, and if it was in the budget, it wouldn't need it. So what's the intent of the council? We'll supply with whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
A police cruiser is, you don't replace it, your maintenance costs go up, you're outside of the warranties on the cars, or the line cars, so we can do it, but we don't know. There's been a bunch of motions probably at the end of the year to clean up motions. Now with the Modernization Act, we might not have as many, but do you want an explanation of us cleaning up the budgets and balancing them by the end of the year as well, and going through all those steps? And so just what is the intent and what does council want, and we'll be happy to provide it. And certainly I didn't give the department heads probably ample opportunity to supply that to get the motion in, but we certainly could supplement it from each department.
Thank you so much. I think that would be really helpful, particularly where we're taking money out of stabilization funds. I think we need to have that documentation and paper trail for how we're spending the money. And I know it's a little bit more work upfront now, but it'll make, I think, planning for next year's budget and future budgets a little bit easier if it's easy to pull all of those, all of that documentation all at once.
So with respect to the cost-benefit analysis and all that, it's a little challenging to do a cost analysis of having a deficit on our books, because really there's no tangible cost at that moment. It's that it will hit us on the recap sheet and count against us in free cash. So there's not really I mean, it
So
doesn't
maybe
work out
that's the
cleanly.
answer for some of the budget cleanup.
For those things, but for the capital items, with regard to a cost-benefit analysis, we don't have a fleet maintenance system that we track the vehicle maintenance, but it's not allocated on a per vehicle basis. So I can't say that this police cruiser cost this much in maintenance per year. So we can't really, I can't actually even say that that much in vehicle maintenance was spent on police cruisers if it's done by the DPW, because it's just coming out of the same budget. So how detailed do you want the analysis to be? Do you want us to be projecting several years into the future, just for current year? What kind of discount rate do you want us to use? I mean, there's...
So I think we're starting off at a very basic level about getting some basic documentation in place when we're making the withdrawals from the stabilization fund and making mid-year transfers. And so let's start with some basic information and then go from there. I mean, if you've got a 10-year-old cruiser and you can say, it looks like we're gonna have to replace the engine this year, that's gonna cost $5,000, and we can buy a new one for X amount of money. I mean,
And I think we can articulate what we do. We never trade them in. We always give them down. So sometimes they go into the auxiliaries and their cars are filling, so we can put that analysis in there. So you know where that one's coming off the line, usually goes to the auxiliaries. Sometimes it ends up at the fire
Right.
chief.
And I will say that
so
particularly at all of the finance subcommittee meetings, the department heads have already done a cost-benefit analysis. It's just never reduced to writing. And
Right.
so it's happening, it's just not being reduced to writing.
I think the information would,
we can do it.
if you just give general, like you just said, Mike, general overview, more for the constituents and the citizens as much as for our finance committee, to show that, this is typically what a car would cost after it gets over so many years, and this is why we made this purchase.
And we'll do is we'll come up with it. And certainly, I'll be happy to come up with the first one if you're more lenient on the first one through the door. And we'll take a stab at it. If you want more,
yeah, that's it.
Please request it.
Well, no, this is a new process, so let's learn together.
I just have one question, because as I was looking through the motions that we're gonna vote on later today, when we were taking money out of an account, out of the capital stabilization account, it would say, this is how much we have in it now. If we pass this one motion, this is how much is gonna be left.
We do that.
And it said that on each, but it didn't give me a total as to if we pass all the motions, what would be left.
It's cumulative. So
It goes down.
It did?
Yeah.
Okay.
See, on the balances, reduce those promotions.
Council
I
President.
didn't see the other.
Yes, ma'am.
I just had one question for Superintendent Howard. I heard tonight, which I wasn't really sure, I thought maybe you might be able to confirm this. Were 7 teachers laid off last year?
So I believe that was the original intent. The total number of positions that were reduced was not 7. I can't give you an accurate figure, I have to go back. And so focused on this year's budget.
I think it was 2.
Yeah, and I know
think
that
it was 2.
I believe you're close, and in terms of the paraprofessionals, those positions were also restored
Yeah.
as part of discussion where
Yeah.
some monies were moved into a capital improvement, and those positions were restored.
And that was,
All of them.
yeah, and I must say, that was because at the particular point in time, we met with the town manager. I was a representative of the school committee that met with the town manager, and we tried to find a way to save those positions. I think it was $180,000, if I'm not mistaken. And the town manager found the money, okay, to save those jobs at the school department. So it goes to what Terry said about us working together as one community, not the town side, not the school side. So I'm glad you brought that up. about
Thank
the
you.
positions.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Yes.
I guess I have one other question. Since we're talking about various different finance things and with the budget too, it's my understanding that some of the various different positions or things in here are grant funded already. And is there any way do we have a list of what those actually are? somewhere? Because I can see how some people would say, well, what do we need this or that for? Is this a priority? When we're talking about priorities and needs, is this a priority? And some of these things are already funded by grants. So I don't know if we can differentiate.
So with respect to positions that are general fund positions that also have some grant funding, I tried to make note of those, or positions that are split funded with either with the school department or with an enterprise fund or anything. Those have been noted as best I'm aware of them. Positions that are wholly grant funded, we don't really. There is a position in the health department that is grant funded, and I think that's the only one that's fully grant funded.
Okay.
Grants for positions have been decreasing significantly over the past several years. It is not something that most granting organizations want to fund because it's something that should be part of your operating budget and it should be a regular thing. And relying on grants to fund positions is challenging because then if the grant runs out, what do we do? Which is one of the problems with the paraprofessionals in last year's budget was the reliance on the kindergarten grant for funding those paraprofessionals, and that is a grant that had been decreasing over time and I believe went away last year or was significantly reduced, so that we had to make a decision about those positions. So
There are other positions that were moved to contract services that are grant funded. We'd rather do contract service when you're using grant funding.
Right.
This way.
So that way we don't have an employee that suddenly a grant is ended and we have the choice of find other funding or lay the person off.
Yeah.
Which
And
is,
we have one or two of those, maybe, just so you know.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't be in the budget book because.
Wonderful.
Anything else?
And just on the grant, on the school side, they're very articulate with it, because when they lay out their budget, they'll have, ABC teacher, and it's $50,000, and then they will back out the amount of the grant and say where the grant is from. So it's really transparent on
The
that.
difference between some of the schools' grant funds is that they are predictable, because special education, your enrollment numbers help predict your particular special ed grant, that you are able to justify the services in there, and it may be reduced a bit, but short of not utilizing your funds properly, the grant is pretty stable. So those are Title I and the 240 special ed entitlement grant, both of those grants have positions. We're moving away from embedding them in there, because if the day does come that those grants are reduced dramatically, we would be looking at layoffs, but it's difficult in situations like now to be moving people out of grants. So move them in a little bit if we can.
Anyone else? Is that it? You
Yes,
done?
that concludes
your last town manager report. I know I said this last night, but again, thank you very much for your services over the last 9 months as the interim town manager. You did an outstanding job, and we appreciate it. Okay. School department update from the last school committee meeting. I know there was a discussion on the Miller Field use, which is pretty routine now when we have a school committee meeting. As well as the school bus stops. We had a discussion about the bus service. Preschool enrollment is on the increase, and I guess they developed this year a situation where folks that are signing their kids up for preschool, they can actually do a payment plan online, which is pretty kind of very unique and very good for folks. Teachers union negotiation has started, I understand. One of the best parts of the evening is when Lisa mentioned that the circuit breaker fund now for special ed reimbursement has been up to 72% versus.
Fingers crossed that we hit 75 by next Friday.
All right, which is great. That's the money that we get reimbursed on special ed funds. We really should be getting 100% reimbursement, but it's, I guess before it's been 60 to 64%, but it was at 72% and hopefully further up. So that's basically it in the school department. Okay, under new business, I'm going to entertain a motion to postpone the vote on the operating budget.
So moved.
Okay,
Second?
we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
We're gonna vote on the budget tonight. We're gonna study this.
Town council to appropriate $201,640 from the free cash to offset portion of the snow and ice deficit.
Motion to refer to finance.
Second? Anybody?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Town council appropriate $25,000 from free cash to replenish derelict property account.
Motion to refer.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Town council transferred $30,201 from the general fund shared expenses to cover additional costs at 151 Pauline Street.
Motion to refer.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Town council to appropriate $7,500 from free cash to replenish the pest control.
Motion to take as an emergency measure if so needed. I'm not sure. I know Al is left. Is that something that is needed now?
I would say,
Yes. So I would like to ask for an emergency request and have that approved now.
Okay. There's a request. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that passes. Town council to transfer $40,000 from capital stabilization fund to a new general fund purchase for a new police cruiser.
Motion to refer.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Town council transfers $33,265 from capital stabilization fund to the new general fund purchase, a new fire truck, and general fund purchase fire department turnout gear.
Motion to refer.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Committee, didn't it?
What'd you say?
That came out of committee, didn't it?
No.
No.
It's going to.
So I just have a question about that one.
Yep.
Was a lot of discussion about the gear and whether or not that was needed for upcoming training. I just want to make sure that we have it on the timeline so that the firefighters can actually go train.
Some of their gears.
Chief?
Council, everybody in the department was measured recently as well. This was brought forward to the town manager approximately 4 years. It was on a 3-year funding plan to get it done. It was funded the first year, and it was no longer funded. Since the new firefighters that have come on during that short time, I have purchased the gear out of my operating budget. This will do the rest of the firefighters, so we'll be in compliance. We're not allowed to wear gear that's over 10 years old. We have a third of the department right now that's wearing gear that's 12 years old.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if you have an upcoming training that we are able to get you the gear
We
before.
borrowed some gear from the supplier, so anybody who is going, the 4 recruits that started the fire academy on Monday have borrowed gear from the manufacturer.
And what's the timeline once we vote for this to be able to have?
Once it's approved, it's 5 weeks.
Okay, just because I know the fire chief loves when the police chief speaks about fire stuff. The national standard is 2 sets. We're struggling to make sure they have 1. So, I think we're working on a plan to try to get them that second set with some creative thinking, and I think we'll get there.
And the gear that's expiring now was bought under assistance to firefighters. So it's been 20 years since the time.
Okay, town council to transfer $75,000 from capital stabilization fund to cover new general fund purchase of a new DPW truck. Do we hear a motion?
Motion to refer.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Final item under new business discussion.
Can I just, there were 2 motions, and I don't know if you want to take them tonight or just refer them, but that came out of finance. One was to transfer $146,000 from capital stabilization to purchase Chromebooks for the school, and another was to a capital request for $16,780 for
Round that up to 17.
$17,000. A capital request for $17,000 from capital stabilization for a Bobcat for the schools, and I'd like to refer those both to finance.
Motion has been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion on the motion?
Has that been to finance committee?
No.
It's gonna go
Just
to
to refer it.
Yeah,
to finance. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, discussion, rink and gym removal, Winthrop Middle School project. Who would like the floor?
I'd like the floor.
Okay.
So we had, there was a motion made and not seconded, whatever, a few weeks back, and I think it's worthy of discussion again, and I will bring it up again. We do have a petition to, there's been a lot of petitions tonight, so I don't want to get into the
You wanna make a
verification of
motion?
signatures and everything else. I would like to make a motion to remove the rink from the middle school project. And, well, I'd like to make that motion and then.
I'll second it.
Okay, open for discussion. Let me just start for discussion, please. The rink is one of our more successful, not that others aren't, but it's one of our more successful enterprise funds. The department head for the rink is here, Bobby Demento, who's done an incredible job in the time he's been there, which even started before he was there, and he's just taken the ball and run with it. The rink has some limitations because of facilities that are down there. The rink has an appropriation from the town council to build out new locker rooms. The rink is potentially losing a probably third or fourth biggest renter next season because of just not proper facilities. We have teams coming in from China and they don't have a place to shower, so it was, not a good thing. There has been a plan that had been bantered about potentially someone coming in and building a new rink at the top where the middle school is. I don't see that, that's my opinion. I think it's highly unlikely that somebody's gonna come in and spend $12 million to build a rink for us and hand it over to the town. We have had other conversations with people that would like to build an additional rink, which if you do have somebody from a rink standpoint that wants to come in, they want 2 sheets of ice because that's how they make money. They have their junior teams, their club teams, the town teams, the high school teams, and then they can run tournaments because the rink is pretty, I don't want to say it's at capacity, but from the months of November till February, that rink is pretty well spoken for. But when you get past the high school season, it doesn't have the adequate facilities to run tournaments, to run clubs, to run skills and such. I would like to see the rink get to a point where it is even more solvable. It has not taken any money from the general fund in years. And I just think it's the prudent thing for the rink to continue in its positive movement, to let it move on, let it conduct the business it has to do, and let it get to the point where they can have new facilities and maintain the renters that they've had, some of them for over 40 years.
Is there any further discussion on this motion?
I think I just first of all want to be very specific. It says on the agenda that this is the rink and gym removal, and I want to just be specific that we're talking about just the rink here. Because I do feel that there was the committee that met for over a year, and the work that they had done, there was with the gym in that plan as well. So I don't want to take away from a couple $100,000 that was put into that plan, and it's part of our master plan. I think we need to follow it. As far as with the rink, I think that a lot of time and planning has gone on to make the rink more feasible over the past couple of years, and I applaud the work of Mr. Demento. And I think that those, as someone who uses the rink, I know that those locker rooms are going to be very valuable to the rink in the long-term future. I also think that it's important, as far as that entire parcel goes, that we have a footprint that any potential developer could be working with. Currently, we're kind of, with this parcel in the rink, we're sending mixed messages on it because we don't know if the rink's going to be there, if it's not. So I think it's important that the council takes a stance on this. I think it's a good idea to take the rink off the table because, and I'm going to vote for this motion by Councilor Lettieri. I just think we need to be specific about the plot of land that we're going to be using in that for the rink's feasibility moving forward. And for those reasons, I'm gonna vote for it. And I think it's a good motion.
Any other discussion?
Yeah. I'm just confused why we're taking it off before we've even actually started any RFP process on this. We literally at our last meeting finally voted for a planner to help us through this process, and we're again cutting it off before we get there. And I can understand exactly where people are coming from. But again, just like I said last week, we're letting everybody camp out and steal their piece of the pie off of this thing instead of trying to get everybody to work together. Let's say someone said, let's build a hotel and on top of the rink, and we'll build the locker rooms for you. We're gonna say no now because someone's gonna come and enhance the rink. I guess I just don't understand why there's the urgency to do this right now when we haven't even actually gone through the process yet of figuring out what can happen on that site.
Any further discussion on your hasn't spoken, Heather? And then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Lucerto. I think that before we decide to take the rink off the table, we need to have an assessment of, the needs and repairs and what are the expected capital costs at this facility over the course of the next 10 or 20 years. Because if we forego our opportunity to put a new rink on that site now, we need to look at what the capital costs for that existing rink are going to be. And we have some of that information in the master plan that talked about what it would cost to bring those, actually it didn't include the rink. So we need to get the cost of what it's going to, we need to get an assessment of what those costs are going to be to bring the rink up to code to make sure it's all ADA compliant, as well as what the capital costs for that building are going to be going forward. I really like the rink. I really appreciate having it. I don't want Winthrop to ever be without a rink, but this might be a good opportunity to look at our options for an upgrade if we can. I think we also need to get some actual data on the cost of a new rink and how that might happen, or maybe it's not feasible, I don't know, but it seems foolish to make the decision without any data in front of us at this point.
Councilor Terry?
Okay, so just to answer a few of the questions, good questions proposed by both Councilor Lucerto and Councilor Ingman. The cost of a new rink is over $12 million. You need 7 to 8 locker rooms to do that. There's always been, even in the master plan, there's never, and Councilor Ingman just mentioned, there's never been a thought of not having a rink. The question is what to do. I want to secure the rink on this location, and the improvements to be made, we have, with the director, gone over a capital plan that will take us well into the next decade. We have new compressors down there. The ADA compliance issue is a huge issue, and it's an issue for us, and that's why we want to go forward with our proposal, which is all self-sustained through the rink. It does not ask for a penny of money out of the general fund. So all the ADA compliance issues are handled in a plan which we already have for the locker room extension. There is a bond that the rink has been paying out of its operating fund for the last 11 years, 12 years, which has 2 years left, or 13 years, which has 2 years left. So we have addressed the issues. We do have, there's not a person that I would rather have in charge and giving us numbers on the rink that you can go down there at any hour during any day and he will tell you how much the electricity is costing him for that hour. And we are extremely fortunate to have that. So we did not come out of this haphazardly. We have proposed a plan. We have talked about this for over 12 months. We had the site as a whole has had RFPs out, and I think Mr. Aiello even mentioned this in a previous meeting that nobody's responded to. We don't want to lose our control of the rink. We're undervalued as far as how much we charge for the rink in terms of hours, in terms of cost per hours, and I think it's very important that we maintain control. But I think we have looked into the budget. We have looked into how it's going to affect us for the upcoming foreseeable future, and I think it's very important that we let the rink do the business that it should be doing.
So.
If I may, I think it would be helpful for all of the council to be able to review that data. I'm sure that you have it and it's available, but I think...
Any further discussion? Just because maybe I should stop the discussion at this point, because it was on the agenda to discuss dropping the rink and the gym. And it was on for discussion, not on for a motion. Brother Lettieri has made a motion. That motion is legitimately standing, except it cannot be voted on in the same night you bring it up. By our charter, once a motion is made, it cannot be voted on in the same evening.
Well, the motion was made at a prior meeting, it just wasn't second. It was made, though.
There was
It's
a
the
motion
second
made,
time
but
it's
it was
been
never second, so that didn't come on as a motion. In my ruling, this would be out of order, and then we can't vote on it tonight.
Right.
So if you want to continue the discussion, that's fine. But, you know, I believe that even after the discussion, we're not going to be able to vote on it tonight. It's the first time this motion was on. The other motion you made was for both the gym and the rink as well, so it's a completely
That's
different
right, so I'll
motion.
table the motion, so to keep the motion on the agenda and put it on the agenda for the next council meeting.
Okay, that's, I think, the correct way to do this. Okay?
End of
So
discussion.
There's been a motion to table,
I'll second it.
and it's been seconded. Any discussion on the motion to table? I think there is none. All those in favor of the motion to table signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, voting so ordered. Motion is tabled, will be on the agenda at the next meeting. Thank you. Give me my gavel back.
So is that,
Public comment.
Council President, if I
I'm
may
sorry.
follow up on the rink. The other, discussion and decision-making that I think the council needs to do with regard to the middle school property, including, the auditorium, the gym, and the rink, is a discussion about priorities and goals for that property. What do we need to get out of it? Because my goal and a priority for me is economic development and trying to generate some, in a smart and thoughtful manner, generating some new revenue for the town. And how we use that property, where we put the rink on the property is going to affect how we're able to accomplish those goals. So I think it's premature to be making a decision to remove the rink from consideration at this point.
It's already been tabled.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I
there's
just want to
nothing in
respond
front.
to, I want to respond to it because I kind of have a difference of opinion. The whole idea of trying to save what we have is because when you look what's been projected out there, some of the ideas that have been thrown out, it talks about a new rink. And you mentioned, what was it, $11 million for a new rink?
11 to 12, the rink in Everett.
And the town is never
in
going to be
Chelsea
able
cost
to
15
afford
million
a new rink.
8 years ago.
We're talking about a public service building that we're going to be talking about as well. The town is not going to be able to afford a $12 million rink. So what's going to happen? It's going to have to be privatized. If it's going to have to be privatized, then now we lose control as far as a community usage. That's my biggest concern, and that's why I'm favoring what Jim wants to do.
I totally agree with that concern, but I just want us to get some actual numbers and data, and let's do a little bit more research before we make the decision.
Okay.
There's no issue on the table.
Okay.
I don't think we should be discussing
Right.
anything.
No more discussion.
isn't it on the agenda though? Yeah, I think
Discussion is on the agenda, yeah.
Yeah, we not discuss it though. I think it's an important discussion, and I think that it's a good idea to move forward with this because my entire tenure on the council, this has been the premier issue, and we don't even have a footprint that we're going off of. And I think that we can continue to study this. We can continue to look at RFPs for the public safety center and a new rink and all these other things. But I think at some point we need to start making a decision about what we want to do with this. And I understand if we can't do that tonight, I hope we can do it at the next meeting, but to just continue to study and look at things, I think is costing the town money. We know it's costing the town money, and I think at a certain point, we need to cut it off, and we need to say we gotta move forward on something. So I'll end it with that.
Okay. End of discussion.
Sure.
One final.
So, my biggest concern in doing this, and what I would like to have, if we can have that, if we're gonna vote on that, is what's the life cycle of the rink now, right? Because we just went through this process with Miller Field, where there was no football, and for how many years while we built a new facility. So there is an opportunity here to make sure that there is never a day in Winthrop without hockey. If this facility, we pour money in, and we gotta build a new rink in 8 years, and surprise, there's no place to put it now, how many years are we gonna have no hockey in Winthrop if we don't take a look at that now? I think we are really hastily moving to this as people are jittery about the idea of privatization, which was never on the table to begin with. And we're not giving ourselves a chance to think outside the box of how we can solve this. But I would really like to know how much longer we can expect that rink to function. Because if it's under 10 years, we should try and tackle that now while we have the opportunity, so that, 4 or 5 years, 6, 7 years down the road, we don't have a 3 or 4 year span where there's no hockey in Winthrop. I just think it's really short-sighted.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I mean, if you feel as though that, that maybe in 10 years that the rink's not going to be able to function, we have a fire station that's, 100 and something years old, and they're still trying to work out of that. And I think trying to sell to the residents a new hockey rink versus a public safety building is kind of, that we really need that. So, it is something we really do need to discuss.
Okay, on that note, we'll end the discussion till the next meeting. Public comment. Anybody? Really? Okay. Public relations. Well, the MWI Annual Poster and Writing Essay Presentation Awards is coming up on 5/25/18, and I am very proud to say that my granddaughter was the 5th grade winner from Winthrop. And they did that before the election. Yes, Gabby Bonaparte. Okay, what else do we have? 6/2, so that is on 6/2/18, the rabies clinic, 9 to 11 a.m. at the fire station. The cost is $10. How long have we been doing the rabies clinic?
Long time.
Forever.
Real long time.
Now it's under the town clerk, though, it's not going to be under the Board of Health.
And on that note, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Oh, I have one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. On May 19th, this coming Saturday, May 19th, the Caldwell Banker, the new real estate company in town, is having a grand opening, and it's open to the general public. So it's on Saturday. From 10 to 3, there'll be an ice cream truck there, and there'll just be balloons and some stuff. And anyone in the town is welcome to come by and say hello, drop in, have a cup of coffee, get a soft drink or whatever. But it's going to be Saturday, May 19th, from 10 to 3.
Where is that, Linda?
It's 218 Winthrop Street. It's right next door to the meat market, in between Brown's and the meat market. So bring the kids down, get an ice cream, and hopefully it'll be a nice day.
Okay, there's a motion for adjournment. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Good night.
Michael?